So now we will see closures in JavaScript. So guys, basically the JavaScript variables can belong to the local or the global scope that we had already seen previously. Now global variables can be made local or private with the help of the closures in JavaScript. So guys, this we are going to check with the help of examples as well, how the closures are going to work and how you can apply them based on your project requirements. Now guys, nested functions are something that you need to know in order to understand the closures, and this also we will check with the help of examples. Now guys, a closure is a function having access to the parent scope even after the parent function has closed. So guys, basically closures are nothing but it is a function inside another function. So basically we have the parent function inside which we are going to have another nested function which we are going to call it as closures, and this nested function is going to have the access to all the variables that are present inside the parent function even after the parent function call has been closed. So guys, let us check the example of closures in JavaScript over here with the help of VS Code in this case. So guys, simply I'm going to create a new file over here. So as you can see, we have closures.js file in this case. So guys, first of all, let us understand the meaning of the global and the local scope over here. So simply we are going to provide the counter variable as the global variable in this case, and then we are going to provide the function in order to add the counter over here. So we have add counter, and then inside this simply we are going to increment the counter by 1. So we have counter plus it is equal to 1 over here, which means we are just adding the number 1 to the counter variable in this case. And then guys, simply we can print this particular value of the counter outside of this function. So what we will do is, let us call this particular add counter function, and then after this we are going to print the counter variable. So in this case we will say count it is equal to, and then inside the open and close curly braces we are going to provide the variable name that is counter. So guys, this is a very straightforward program. We are going to increment the counter with the help of this particular function, and we are going to get the counter is equal to 1 value over here, which will be printed at the end of this particular program. So guys, let me just save this file now and try running this code on the terminal by using the node command followed by the name of the JavaScript file. So guys, as you can see, count is equal to 1 this time, and if again we call the function once again, that is add counter, now the counter it will be equal to 2 this time. So let me just save this file now and try running this code once again over here on the terminal. So as you can see, count is equal to 2. So it depends on how many number of times you want to call the add counter over here. That many number of times the counter value will be incremented by 1 over here. Now guys, this is a very simple example of the global variable in this case. This particular counter variable is a global variable and it can be accessed from anywhere inside this particular file right now. So guys, that is the limitation of the global variable. What if you don't want the other objects to access this particular counter variable directly? So in that case, you need to provide the local variable inside the add counter over here. So let us check that as well. When we provide the counter variable inside of the add counter in this case, and then we initialize it to 0 over here. So guys, what will be the value in this case right now? Previously we had seen that 2 times when we had called the add counter, the latest value was 2 over here. But this time, since we are having the local variable that is counter inside the add counter, let us see what will be the output. Let me just save this file now and try running this code once again over here on the terminal. So as you can see, count it is equal to 0 right now. Why so? Because this particular counter variable is now referring to the global variable over here, which is defined outside of the function, and not this particular counter variable which is inside the function having the local scope. So guys, that is the reason why we are getting the value that is 0 over here. So always remember that even if you have the two variables with the same name, but they are having the global scope and the local scope over here, so it depends on this particular statement where you are accessing the variable. So since we are accessing it outside of this particular function, it is referring to the global variable over here. If we access it inside this particular function, it will refer to this particular local scope variable. Now guys, another important trick over here is, in order to make this particular counter as the global variable, simply we can remove this let keyword over here, and automatically this counter variable will now become a global variable. So let us now see what will be the output. Let me just save save this file now and try running this code once again over here on the terminal. So as you can see, count it is equal to 1 right now. That's because first time when this add counter was called, basically counter was equal to 0 and it was incremented by 1 over here. Now next time when this function is called once again the counter is initialized to 0 and then 1 is added to this particular counter, and that is why we are getting the latest value as 1 over here. So even though if we had called this add counter twice, but still we are getting the counter is equal to 1 value over here. So guys, these are certain limitations as far as the local and the global scope of the JavaScript variables are concerned. Now guys, what if you want to avoid the access of this particular counter variable, but at the same time you want to maintain the value of the counter variable irrespective of which object is trying to access it? So in this case we need to make use of the closures over here. So guys, how do we do that? So simply I'm going to remove these lines of code over here, and also we will remove this particular global variable from here. So guys, simply we are going to keep this function add counter, and inside this function we are going to provide the counter variable over here. It is equal to 0 this time, and then guys, inside this we are going to have a nested function. Now what is the meaning of nested function? We are going to have a function inside another function over here, in which case this will become the parent function, and then the function that we are going to define is, let us say we provide the name as plus over here. So this is going to be the child function. In this case we also call it as a nested function over here. So guys, what this will do is simply it is going to increment the value of counter by 1 over here. So again we are going to have this simple line of code in this case, that is counter plus it is equal to 1 this time. And then guys, what we will do is, let us say we simply want to log this particular counter value. So over here simply we will say count it is equal to counter over here. So we have count it is equal to dollar symbol, and then inside the open and close curly braces we will have counter variable. So as you can see, this is the child function inside the parent function, that is add counter over here, and this is nothing but a closure that we have defined. So guys, over here let me just comment out these lines of code once again in this case, and what we will do is simply we are going to call this particular add counter function. So guys, when we say add counter function over here, this call should return the inner function that we have defined, which is plus over here. So in the end we also have to provide the return statement, and we will say return plus over here, which is the inner function that we have defined. So guys, basically when we call this add counter, it is going to return the inner function, that is plus, and we need to catch it inside another variable. So let us say we simply call it as my function over here. This is the variable inside which we are going to have the inner function, that is plus in this case. So basically we are calling the add counter, which is going to return the plus function over here at the end of this particular function execution, and then we are going to have this plus function inside the my function over here. Now guys, simply we can call this my function any number of times in order to increment the value of count. Now guys, if you see, basically when we call this particular my function, the control flow will go inside this particular function plus over here, which is going to increment the value of counter in this case. And if you notice, we are not declaring the counter variable inside this function, but it is present outside of this function over here, but inside of the parent function, that is add counter. So guys, this is nothing but the lexical environment in JavaScript for this particular function plus in this case. So even though this particular function call has been closed, but since we are referring to this inner function over here, it is going to have access to the outer variables that are already defined inside this parent scope over here, and this is what we call it as the lexical environment, which is very important in order to understand the closures. So if we now call this particular my function over here, you will notice that this particular line of statement will be executed and we will get the latest value of the counter variable. So guys, over here simply we are going to call the my function over here followed by the open and close parenthesis. So let me just save this file now and try running this code once again over here on the terminal. So as you can see, count it is equal to 1 is now getting printed over here. Once again, if we want to increment the value of the counter again, so simply we need to call the my function once again over here second time. So when we save this file now and try running this code once again over here on the terminal, so as you can see, count is equal to 1 for the first time when we called the my function, which is instead calling the plus function over here, and then second time when we call the my function once again, it is having the count value, it is equal to 2. So guys, even though we are not initializing it once again over here, that is counter is equal to 0, it is remembering the value of counter from the previous function call and then incrementing it once again during the second call of this my function over here, which is indirectly calling the plus function, which we have defined as a closure function over here. So guys, in this way the closure functions work in JavaScript. There is a very important application that we are going to understand in the next video over here. We are going to create another closure function. So guys, comment in the comment section below whether you have learned something out of this video. Please make sure that you like this video so that it reaches to more people, and subscribe to this channel so that you get the notifications on upcoming videos as well. I'll see you in the next video, in which we are going to talk about factory function in JavaScript by using the closures. So stay tuned.